Test J, Section 2, Question 19. Historian says the Land Party achieved its only national victory in Benestria in 1935. That sounds like a fake, made-up country. Apologies if your family is from Benestria. It doesn't really matter though, because that sounds like it's a premise of an argument, and I'm going to accept it as a fact. You know, Benestria, 1935, Land Party, only national victory. Got it. It received most of its support that year in rural and semi-rural areas where the bulk of Benestria's population lived at the time. Okay, so most of them lived in the country. That's where the Land Party got most of their support. I mean, it kind of stands to reason if that's where most of the people lived. Anyway, the economic woes of the years surrounding that election hit agricultural and small business interests the hardest. And the Land Party specifically targeted those groups in 1935. Okay, so whatever. I already know they won. Here's what they did. Maybe that helped them win, but they also might have won for any other reason. I conclude, okay. Here's the part that I'm going to argue with, right? So the game we're playing on LSAT logical reasoning is that we are going to grant our opponent their premises, and we are going to nonetheless disagree with our opponent's conclusion. So everything they've said so far is gold-plated fact. I'm not going to argue with any of that, but I am going to argue with whatever comes next, because guaranteed their conclusion is not going to be fully proven by those facts. That's just the game we're playing on LSAT logical reasoning. I conclude that the success of the Land Party that year was due to the combination of the Land Parties specifically addressing the concerns of these groups and the depth of the economic problems people in these groups were facing. That is a correlation, therefore causation argument. It's a very common flawed pattern of reasoning on the LSAT. Just because these two things happened at the same time does not mean that one of those things caused the other. If this were a flaw question, I could immediately pick an answer that said, hey, you've confused correlation for causation. It turns out to be a strengthen except question. So what they're telling you here is that there are 4 strengtheners and 1 non-strengthener. Be careful here. The correct answer does not necessarily have to weaken the argument. 4 of the answers are going to strengthen the argument. The correct answer might weaken the argument, but the correct answer also might just be irrelevant. It might be the only one that doesn't strengthen. Okay, so they cited evidence that their only victory happened in 1935 in this one place. They cited evidence that most of their support came from rural and semi-rural areas where the economic woes were really bad around that time, and the Land Party specifically targeted those agricultural and small business interests. I'm granting them all of that, and they're saying, okay, so, well, that's why they won, is because the economic problems of those people were so bad. They specifically targeted those people. That's why they won. You know, my objection, before I even look at the answer choices, my objection is, what if the previous guy was just the world's biggest asshole? What if they just got lucky? What if they just ran right after the world's biggest asshole who was like on Twitter trying to set the world on fire every single time, all day, you know, for their whole reign? If that were the case, then literally anybody could win the next election. How do they know that that's not true? So the 4 wrong answers here are going to help to support their conclusion that the economic woes and the targeting of those people is what helped them to get their only victory. A. In preceding elections, the Land Party made no attempt to address the interests of economically distressed urban groups, and that's going to be the correct answer, y'all. If that said if that said rural or semi-rural, I would read it as a strengthener, because this is their only victory. I know that they targeted these groups. A says, yeah, this is the only time they targeted, if it said rural, which is what I was expecting it to say, and it would have been a strengthener. But that's not what it said, which means it's irrelevant. The fact that they have never otherwise targeted urban groups, well, urban groups were nothing to do with the historian's argument. They didn't target urban groups in this particular election. Saying they never targeted urban groups in other elections doesn't do anything. That's going to be the answer, I'm pretty sure. And it's, again, there's one word that made it not a strengthener. And that's what we're looking for here, is not a strengthener. So that's going to be the answer. Let me just make sure, though, that B, C, D, and E each strengthen the argument. B, voters are more likely to vote for a political party that focuses on their problems. I know that the Land Party did focus on these people's problems. B seems kind of obvious, right? But legal argumentation is not obvious. Legal argumentation, you need to put all of your facts, you need to connect all of the dots in a super heavy-handed way. B helps their argument because B says, hey, they targeted these people's groups, and people tend to vote for people who target their needs. Okay, that helps them build their case. Now, it doesn't prove their case, but it at least helps their case. And 4 of these answers are going to be like helpers. B's a helper, so it's out. C, the Land Party had most of its successes when there was economic distress in the agricultural sector. So even when they didn't win national victories, because I know they only had one national victory, and it was a time of economic distress, C says, yeah, all their other successes tended to happen when there was times of economic distress, which helps build the case that the reason why they won their only national victory this time was because of the economic distress in the agricultural sector. D, no other major party in Benestria specifically addressed the issues of people who lived in semi-rural areas in 1935. Okay, stands to reason. I know that there was this distress. I know that the Land Party focused on these people who were having this distress. D says, yeah, nobody else focused on these people who were having this distress. Okay, that tends to support the idea that that's why they won. E, the greater the degree of economic distress someone is in, the more likely that person is to vote. Oh, well, I wasn't expecting a thing about turnout, but E's like, yeah, people who are having a hard time tend to turn out to vote more. So the reason why they won is because they focused on these people, and those people tended to turn out because they were having economic distress, according to E. So B, C, D, and E all help them prove their case. A is just irrelevant because of urban, and the answer here is A.